Riders on the storm, into this house we're born.
Okay, Dr. Russell Blaylock, brain surgeon, neuroscience expert, joining us right now. We were getting into if people knew how deadly vaccines were, they would never take them. It does seem that's starting to come out. I'm sure, because I've seen you writing on it, for years you've talked about all these degenerative diseases of the brain associated with different things in the vaccines. Not just the one that's making headlines right now that they're talking about, but a whole group of these. But for listeners that just now joined us, one of the headlines is swine flu jab link to killer nerve disease. Leaked letter reveals concerns of neurologist. Over 25 deaths in America just in the trials, and how to keep this secret from the public. And then I have a whole other big stack, top virologist, a whole bunch of top brain scientists, neurosurgeons are saying the same thing in Bild, the biggest newspaper in Germany. They're saying it has live cancer viruses in it. I mean, this is just wild stuff, but I want you to get into that, Doctor. But first, finishing up the break, cut you off, is the sluggishness, the additives, the vaccines, the chemicals in the water? Is it a cocktail of those? Because, yeah, I mean, I guess retarded isn't the word. It's more of a sluggishness, almost a glazed over. Or is it a mix of watching 4.5 hours of TV a day? We're a very passive population. I mean, what is it? Because I look at old black and white photos. I look at old family Super 8 video or video or film shot 20, 30, 40 years ago of my family. They're alive. They look awake. I mean, it's not nostalgia. Something real is going on there. What is taking the spark out of people from your research?
Well, I think if we look at it, and a lot of scientists are beginning to agree with this, it's a number of environmental assaults on people, things like fluoride in water, the heavy use of pesticides and herbicides. It's all in the atmosphere. You know, when they study people, look at their fat content of these chemicals, they find something like 80 to 110 different organic chemicals from industry, pesticides, and herbicides in their tissues. All of the vaccinations, we give 40, 50, 60 vaccines by the time a child enters college. They're just being vaccinated to death. Well, I do rather intense research in the literature, collecting all that's known from our research in the neuroscience of vaccination and what it does. Well, there's just compelling evidence that these vaccines, the way they're being given, is producing a state of chronic brain inflammation. And that when your brain is chronically inflamed, it produces depression, it produces disorientation, confusion, difficulty thinking clearly, just clouded thinking in your mind, fatigue, abnormal behavior, even violent behavior, criminal behavior, suicide, addictions. The list just goes on. And this is all well demonstrated in the scientific literature. The problem is it's never discussed because the pressure and the power of those that are promoting these vaccines in our children. For instance, the average child's getting 36 vaccines by the time they start school. That is an enormous assault on the brain by this vaccine. And the process by which they do it, that is spacing them every 2 months and giving 5 and 6 and 7 vaccines at each office visit, produces an enormous activation of the brain's immune system in a prolonged way, and each section or segment of that vaccination process produces a real hyper-intense brain inflammation that in some children produces autism, some ADHD, some have seizures, some have other neurological dysfunctions. Well, this whole flu vaccine thing, they're planning on doing 3 serial vaccines within 21 days. Well, if you look at the neuroscience of that, that produces a rather significant prolonged brain inflammation, particularly with the adjuvant they're going to use, which is called MF59 and ASO3, which contains squalene. Squalene is associated with a very high incidence of autoimmune disorders, particularly of the brain, for instance, producing a multiple sclerosis-like syndrome.
In fact, didn't some of the best evidence was when they guinea pigged a few years ago the anthrax shots to see what would happen with the troops in different levels, and it killed quite a few of them.
Well, it caused a 200% increase in ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, which is a fatal disorder. So they finally admitted that. It took a long time to get them admitted. I remember a lieutenant colonel testifying before Congress, and he was in the middle stages of ALS and eventually died. It took a lot of pressure before they admitted, yes, the vaccine caused these soldiers to die from this horrible disease. Well, it's not the only disease that's neurological, this Guillain-Barré ascending paralysis that you talked about. Well, in 1976, there were over 500 reported cases, but there were probably 10 or 100 times greater number of cases that were never reported because it's not a reportable disease. You don't have to report it. They had 3 elderly people died in one vaccination center in one day after receiving the vaccine. And they're doing the same thing now they did back then. It's the bait and switch. They tested one vaccine and then gave millions of people a different vaccine. That's exactly what they admit they're planning to do now. I have in Nature magazine an interview with the head of the U.S. Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, Anthony Fauci, F-A-U-C-I, and they asked him a series of questions. One was, what are you going to do to test this vaccine? They said, well, we have 5 tests, and they said, well, are you going to put the adjuvant in the vaccine to test it? And he said, no, we're going to test it without the adjuvant on children and pregnant women and other people. And then he said, well, are you going to use the adjuvanted vaccine when you actually give it to people? He said, yeah. So they're testing one vaccine, and it's going to give a different vaccine. It's the adjuvant, the powerful immune stimulant, that produces most of the complications that are associated with vaccination. And the next question, he said, are you going to test adjuvants in children? And he said, and I quote, I don't think anybody has really good data on adjuvants in children. And decision that we will not give the adjuvated flu vaccine to kids, we don't have time to collect substantial data. In other words, during the test, but when the vaccine comes out, the children will get vaccines with adjuvant in it.
Now, Dr. Blaylock, just to interrupt you, talking to yourself and other scientists, other medical doctors, other brain surgeons and neurologists, more and more we're realizing that, yes, mercury and aluminum are bad, do build up, do cause problems when it's directly put in the bloodstream. Now, different from eating fish and it goes through you and is bound to the other, other things in the food. So most of it leaves the body. Again, I'm not here being a doctor. I'm just going off what doctors have said. Do you agree with a lot of the literature coming out that mercury overall is somewhat of a red herring, that it's really the autoimmune inflammation, not just in the brain, but even in other organs that's being associated with burning out the pancreas, attacking the liver, attacking the stomach walls, the intestinal walls, the brain, just basically the whole body?